There is a specific kind of pain that nobody talks about. It is not the pain of failing. It is the pain of knowing you need to start over and being completely unable to do it. You are not lazy. You are not weak. You are not a coward. What is happening to you has a name, it has a mechanism, and it has been studied by neuroscientists and behavioral economists for decades. And the reason most people never escape it is not because they lack discipline. It is because nobody ever explained to them what it actually is. In a few minutes, you will understand 3 specific psychological traps that make starting over feel almost impossible for most people. And you will meet 3 individuals who, facing far worse than most of us will ever face, found a way to break each one. Let us start with what is actually happening when you cannot bring yourself to start over. In the late 1970s, behavioral economists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky documented something that changed the way we understand human decision-making. They called it loss aversion. The human brain does not weigh potential gains and potential losses equally. Losing something feels roughly twice as powerful, psychologically, as gaining the equivalent thing. Losing $100 hurts more than winning $100 feels good. This wiring made sense on the savannah 200,000 years ago. The cost of a wrong decision, losing shelter, losing food, losing the tribe, was often death. So evolution built a brain that is deeply, almost irrationally resistant to abandoning what already exists in favor of something uncertain. The problem is that this ancient wiring now operates inside modern lives, and it produces 3 specific psychological locks. You may recognize all 3 of them. Lock 1 is called the sunk cost lock. Research at the University of Chicago identified what happens in the brain when we have already invested heavily in something: a career, a relationship, a project, a version of ourselves. The dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the region associated with implementing social rules and moral reasoning, activates during sunk cost decisions. In other words, your brain is not just calculating future probabilities, it is also enforcing a kind of internal social contract. Stopping feels like breaking a promise to yourself. Stopping feels like admitting that the time and effort and identity you built around this thing were wasted. So instead of calculating whether the path ahead is worth taking, most people calculate how much they have already invested in the path they are on. And the bigger that investment, the more years, the more sacrifices, the more of your identity you have wrapped up in it, the more psychologically impossible it feels to leave. Behavioral economists call this throwing good money after bad. Psychologists call it escalation of commitment. But for the person living it, it just feels like loyalty. It feels like not giving up. It feels sometimes like integrity. That is lock 1. And it is the most common reason people stay in careers, relationships, and lives that are slowly making them smaller. Lock 2 is called the identity lock. Psychologists have a term, identity foreclosure, which describes what happens when a person's sense of self becomes so merged with one role, one career, one relationship, that they can no longer imagine existing outside of it. They have not chosen their identity through exploration. They have accepted it, and they have built their entire psychological structure on top of it. When you have been a teacher for 20 years, you are not just a person who teaches. You are a teacher. When you have been in a relationship for a decade, that relationship is not just something you have. It is part of who you are. When the thing ends, or when you realize you need to leave it, you are not just making a career change or ending a partnership. You are asking yourself to cease to exist in the form you have always known. That is not a small thing. That is an existential threshold. And the brain, which is built above all else to preserve its sense of self-continuity, treats that threshold like a threat to survival. This is why people who are clearly unhappy in their current lives, who know intellectually that something needs to change, often cannot bring themselves to act. They are not afraid of the new thing. They are afraid of the absence of self that exists in the space between who they were and who they will become. Lock 3 is called the probability lock, and it is the one that most people are actually most aware of, even if they have never named it. It is the voice that says, You are too old. It is too late. The people who do this successfully start young, start with more resources than you, start with connections you do not have. You have done the math in your head, and the math does not work in your favor. Here is what is true about that voice. It is not entirely wrong. Starting over is hard. The odds are genuinely not equal to the odds you faced at 22 with nothing to lose. That part is accurate. What that voice gets wrong is that it compares your restart to a first start. It assumes that what you lost, the years, the relationships, the structures, left you with nothing. It does not account for what decades of investment actually built inside you that cannot be taken away. The skills, the judgment, the understanding of failure that someone starting for the first time does not yet have. The three people you are about to meet faced this voice too. What they understood about it was the same, even though they lived in different centuries, different countries, and different circumstances. And what they understood is worth more than any motivational speech you have ever heard. In 1955, Harlan Sanders was 65 years old. His restaurant was gone. A new highway had been rerouted away from his property, ending the traffic that sustained his business for 2 decades. He received his first Social Security check, $105. That was what he had after 30 years of work, multiple business failures, a string of career restarts, and more setbacks than most people absorb in a lifetime. What most people do not know about Sanders is that he had started over before. He had been a farmhand, a streetcar conductor, a railroad fireman, a ferry boat operator, a tire salesman, and a gas station owner, all before he discovered he had a talent for cooking. He had spent decades investing in paths that did not work, and rather than calculating the value of what he had lost, Sanders made a specific psychological move that behavioral economists now study. He stopped counting what he had spent. He started asking only what he had that was still worth something right now. The answer was a chicken recipe that people drove out of their way to eat. He put that recipe in a pressure cooker, got in a car, and drove from restaurant to restaurant asking owners to try it. He was rejected over 1,000 times. He did not stop because he was not counting the rejections as evidence of failure. He was counting something else. Every yes was a franchise. Every franchise was $1. The math was moving in the right direction. At 65, with $105 and a recipe, he broke the sunk cost lock by refusing to let the weight of the past determine the value of what he had right now. He earned his first $1 million at 68. In 1990, Vera Wang was 40 years old. She had spent 23 years at Vogue magazine, climbing, working, building an identity as one of fashion's most respected editors. When the position of editor-in-chief opened, she was passed over. For most people in her position, that rejection would have confirmed the identity lock. You are a Vogue editor. You are not a designer. The identity is already set. The structure is already built. What are you without the title you have spent 23 years earning? Wang made a different move. Faced with the collapse of the identity she had constructed, she did not replace it immediately with a new one. She sat with a question instead. What do I actually know how to see? The answer had nothing to do with her title. It had to do with her eye. The trained, specific, decades-sharpened ability to recognize what was beautiful, what was proportioned correctly, and what was missing from a market she knew intimately. She had noticed that bridal gowns, the most expensive garment most women would ever wear, were consistently ugly, overworked, overdressed. She could see what was wrong, and 23 years of learning to see had given her that. She did not start over as a designer. She started over as someone who had spent 2 decades learning to see, and was now choosing a different canvas. Within 10 years, Vera Wang had dressed Olympic athletes, first ladies, and every major award ceremony in America. Her identity had not been erased. It had been accurately described, possibly for the first time. In 1942, Viktor Frankl was 37 years old, a trained psychiatrist with a promising career, a wife he adored, and a nearly completed manuscript he believed in deeply. He was arrested and sent to Auschwitz. He lost his wife. He lost his manuscript. He lost everything that the probability lock would consider evidence that survival or future success was possible. What Frankl developed in the camps, and later documented in Man's Search for Meaning, one of the most widely read books of the 20th century, was a psychological framework that directly dismantles the probability lock. He observed that the prisoners who survived longest were not the strongest physically, and were not the most resourceful materially. They were the ones who had found or maintained a sense of meaning about why they were still alive. Frankl called this logotherapy. The core idea is this: when the external evidence for survival is zero, a human being can still survive if they have a reason. Not a probability, a reason. Probability is a calculation made from the outside. Meaning is a commitment made from the inside. And the probability lock can only hold you if you let it do the math on your behalf. Frankl survived Auschwitz. He was liberated in 1945. He rewrote the manuscript he had lost from memory. It went on to sell over 16 million copies. He taught psychiatry until he was 86 years old. He broke the probability lock not by calculating better odds, but by refusing to let odds be the unit of measurement. 3 people, 3 different centuries, 3 different versions of impossible. What they shared was not luck. It was not unusual talent. It was not the absence of fear or loss or grief. All 3 of them felt those things in proportions most of us will never know. What they shared was a specific cognitive move. They stopped letting the weight of what they had lost determine the value of what they still had. They stopped letting a fixed identity decide what they were allowed to become, and they stopped letting probability be the only language in which they measured their future. These are not personality traits. They are learnable. They are, in fact, the same skills that researchers in post-traumatic growth, resilient psychology, and behavioral economics have been studying for decades. And the research is consistent. The single greatest predictor of whether someone successfully starts over is not their circumstances. It is whether they have been told and whether they believe that the locks are not permanent. They are not. If you are standing somewhere right now where starting over feels like the only honest path forward, I want to leave you with one question. Not a plan, not a 5-step system, just one question. Not, what did I lose? Not, what are the odds? Not, who am I without this? Those are the questions the locks want you to ask. The question is, what do I have right now that is still worth something? Sanders answered that with a chicken recipe and a car. Wang answered it with 23 years of learning to see. Frankl answered it with a reason to be alive and a manuscript he had already written once. Your answer is in there. It has been there the whole time. If this video helped you understand something about where you are right now, subscribe. We publish new content on psychology, philosophy, and the science of the human mind every week. The links to every book referenced in this video, including Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning and Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, are in the description below. If you are someone who is actively working through a restart right now, those 2 books are the clearest companions I know for this particular territory. Coming up next, we look at 10 sentences that have been proven to rewire how the brain processes failure. Not motivational quotes, but specific language structures that change neural firing patterns over time. That video is worth watching before this one fades. Subscribe and come back tomorrow.